All right, welcome everyone to the finals of the U16 division of the International Club Debate League Nationals. We are so excited to welcome the pro team from Potomac DZ, First speaker, Vinay Dubakala. And second speaker, Kevin Zhang. On the con side, we have the team of Capital KS, first speaker Andrew Kapadia. And second speaker Ving Salisbury. Once again, gentlemen, it's an incredible privilege for you to be here. We're so excited that you've made it this far in the tournament. We know it's a lot of hard work that you've put in, and we can't wait to see what you've come up together as your arguments and what you have for the judges here today. To introduce you to the judges, we have Vlad Savronsky. We also have Ulrich Polya, as well as Cassandra Colon. Good luck to all of you, and have a great debate.
Thank you.
Right. Thank you.
All right, judges ready? Opponents ready? Kevin? All right. We'll begin the clock now. Give a man a minimum wage increase and you feed him for a day. Teach a man an improved job skill set and you feed him for a lifetime. The minimum wage was created as a standard to protect the people of a lower socioeconomic status. And at the surface, this may seem true. However, as we delve deeper into this issue, we find that minimum wage is actually contrary to what it's supposed to be doing, and it's actually hurting those of the lower socioeconomic class. And it is for the following reasons that we affirm the resolution that the United States minimum wage should be abolished. We will define the minimum wage as both the federal and the state minimum wages. Now, judges, before I begin, I'm going to offer you two key observations. The first observation is that according to Cornell University Law School, the minimum wage's primary purpose is to aid and protect the lowest paid of the nation's working population, those who lack the bargaining power to secure for themselves a minimal wage. Thus, citizens who are in extreme poverty should be prioritized in this debate and is the most important factor in deciding the round of this debate. Furthermore, if the affirmative side is able to prove that keeping the minimum wage is not aiding or protecting the lowest paid in the nation, you must vote for the affirmative. Our second observation is that the current average state minimum wage sits at $8.11. However, according to CNN, with 21 expected increases in the state minimum wage over the next few years, the average state minimum wage is expected to increase by 8% to $8.73. Choosing not to abolish the minimum wage inevitably means that raises in the minimum wage will occur. Thus, affirmative side will be going on the thing that assumes that choosing to keep the minimum wage is also choosing to increase it. Our first argument is that keeping the minimum wage is hurting those in extreme poverty. The minimum wage has been kept as a standard to protect those who are the most vulnerable, yet not only has it failed to protect them, it is hurting them. When companies are forced to pay a minimum wage rather than helping the citizens in need, we're actually pressuring companies to only keep employees who have good education, lots of talent, and for future paths in which low citizens dream of every single day, but at the same time are being disproportionately affected by the minimum wage. According to Cato in 2012, the disemployment effects of the minimum wage have been found to fall disproportionately on the least skilled and the most disadvantaged individuals, including the disabled, the youth, the lower skilled workers, immigrants, and ethnic minorities. Furthermore, Mir and West find that a 10% increase in the minimum wage is associated with a 0.5% decrease in net job growth. In addition, the Heritage Foundation found that increasing the minimum wage to a $10 average would eliminate an estimated 300,000 jobs per year and lower the national gross domestic product by an average of $40 billion per year. Now, obviously, this is quite contrary to the goal of the minimum wage, as the National Bureau of Economic Research finds that an increase in unemployment by 1% increases the poverty rate by 0.7%. Now, Judge, a second argument is that the minimum wage is encouraging small businesses to resort to illegal immigrants and outsource to other countries. Without adequate resources or a sturdy foundation, small businesses cannot afford to pay workers at a minimum wage, as this would mean allocating funds that would be used to grow businesses. This forces small businesses to look outside the law and exploit illegal immigrants who cannot afford to be caught. In fact, according to the Congressional Economic Committee, the minimum wage encourages smaller businesses to hire illegal aliens in order to avoid the minimum wage and increase profits. Furthermore, it also causes businesses to outsource to other countries in order to avoid the minimum wage. Look to a study done by Harvey, a Duke professor, who finds that increasing the minimum wage would result in a 70% of companies increasing outsourcing and moving actual production outside the United States. So judges, what we're seeing under the pro world is we're increasing employment and we're increasing the amount of jobs that lower citizen class people get. Under the con world, what we're seeing is we're increasing disemployment, and we're seeing more companies resort to illegal immigrants and exploitation, and we're seeing more companies resort to outsourcing of their goods, overall detrimenting our economy. So, Judge, for these reasons, we affirm the resolution. Thank you.
We'll start now. So let's first of all talk about your small businesses. You said there's going to be outsourcing to other
Correct.
countries. Can you give me like 3 examples of this happening?
You want 3 examples?
2, 3, whatever. Just
Okay,
some
well,
examples.
I can't give you a specific example, but I'll give you a theoretical example. Let's say that a company is being forced to, as we see it rise in the minimum.
I didn't ask for a theoretical example.
Okay,
I asked
fine.
if you give you
I'll give you a real example.
Okay.
Let's say a company is forced to increase their pays because the minimum wage is increasing. They're forced to, they can't really pay. Small companies obviously cannot pay their employees that much with an increase in the minimum wage. So what they do is they look to other countries, they look to other places where they cannot afford, where they can actually afford to pay their employees, and they can increase production. So let's say you go to a country like India where the prices of work are much lower. You transition your business to India, and what that does is it detriments the economy because it doesn't bring the benefits of that economic
Can I
growth.
clarify one thing?
Sure.
Are you talking specifically about small businesses?
I'm talking about businesses in general.
But do you think it's more likely for small businesses than larger businesses?
No,
to do
no,
this?
not at all.
You think all businesses will be forced to do
Yes,
this?
that's exactly what I think.
So, what is the net negative, according to you, of outsourcing in general?
Oh, well, so I just explained that to you. So what we see is companies are forced to move outside of the country. So
right.
what it's doing is it's not the companies that are inside the country, when they're inside the country, allow for the economy to grow because they're putting money into the market. But when the companies transition their market outside of the country, we're seeing loss in that money spending in the market.
And you would agree, I'm sorry, you would agree that the minimum wage has risen before, right?
Yeah.
And has this happened in the past before?
I mean, we're seeing outsourcing in the current status quo.
We're seeing it, but it's not increasing right now in the status quo.
Yeah, but we just showed you that 21 states have already announced that they're going to be increasing, we're going to be seeing it.
Right, but it hasn't increased.
Yeah, but the thing is, you guys are advocating for a
Right,
remaining.
and I agree with you on that.
So outsourcing, you're agreeing with outsourcing is an increase.
No, but we'll clarify.
Okay, is everyone ready? Are you guys ready?
Yeah.
All right. So I'll start now. So welcome to the final round. Ving and I will be negating the resolution, which means that we are in favor of keeping the minimum wage in place. Our first contention is about the standard of living. If you think about it historically, a lack of a minimum wage has never ended well for the little guy, but it's always benefited corporate bigwigs. That's the problem, because corporations run off of profit-based incentives. That means that they're trying to maximize the amount of profit that they make at all costs. That's going to result in what's called a race to the bottom, which means that companies are going to be trying to pay their employees as little as possible while still retaining their talent. We see in many Southeast Asian countries where there's a minimal or non-existent minimum wage that large corporations capitalize on the plight of low-income citizens. Not only is this morally wrong, but it's also unnecessary to risk the well-being of low-income Americans when 96% of Americans already earn above the minimum wage. There's almost no problem with the current minimum wage, so it's not worth abolishing it and risking the well-being of these people. Moving on to our second contention, which is city stability, or otherwise known as gentrification. What we're seeing right now is that in major high cost of living cities like New York and San Francisco, minimum wage workers are being pushed out of those cities because what's happening is that the cost of living is rising and their wages aren't. And what's going to happen if you vote pro is once their wages drop, the government will have to further subsidize these workers so that they can continue to work in these shops and restaurants throughout these major cities. But another negative for these workers is that cities have become hubs of opportunity and employment, and when you push them out because they can't afford to live there, they're losing access to higher opportunity and better employment, and that's a major problem because you're keeping them where they are and you're taking away their mobility. Let's move on to our third and most important contention, which is about young adults. Young adults stand the most to lose from a pro ballot, but they stand the most to gain from a minimum wage. What we see right now, according to the Pew Research Center in 2017, that in 2015, there were about 2.6 million hourly workers who were at or below the minimum wage. But about 45% of them were between the ages of 16 to 24. These are people who are trying to finance their education, pave a future for themselves, and it's very problematic if their wages drop because what happens is they can't afford to be educated, they can't afford to contribute to society in the future. That's a major problem, and Pro must prove how they are going to make things better for young adults and for low-income Americans in general in order to justify this change. So if you're in favor of helping low-income Americans and maintaining the demographics and fiscal stability of our cities, as well as propping up the future of our young adults, we urge a con ballot.
Judges, can we run a bit of prep time?
Yeah, we'll just start now.
All right. Judges ready?
1 second.
Okay. We'll begin now. So are you aware of the supply and demand curve that exists in our economy?
Which exists in every economy. Yes.
Right. Yeah. Are you aware of it?
Yes.
So can you explain it to me what it means?
Well, as supply goes up,
Right.
demand goes, or as demand goes up, supply goes up, right?
So let me ask you a question.
Yeah.
You raise wages. You raise a minimum wage. Businesses, are they going to have to cut employees, or are they going to be able to increase employees with higher wages being forced to pay?
What do you mean?
Like, so as we increase the minimum wage, businesses are going to have to pay their employees more, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So do you think businesses are going to make cuts in their employment, or are they going to increase employment when they have higher wages?
Oh, absolutely not. And I'm glad that you bring up the supply and demand curve, because what's going to happen is when you put a few extra dollars in the pockets of low-income Americans, what happens is that they go out and spend that.
Okay,
And if you want to go on the topic of
completely-
economics, there's a theory called the economic multiplier effect, which means that for every dollar they're spending,
Okay.
that has a greater effect on the
All right.
economy, which means that the supply increases
All right.
because demand goes
That's
up
good. I
when
understand.
low-income
I
Americans
understand.
are spending more
I
money.
understand. So your second contention talks about city stability, right?
Mhm.
And you said that the minimum wage is too low because it's for workers right now, so they can actually
In
afford to live
particular
in cities.
cities, yes.
So let's say you raise the minimum wage. Companies in those cities, they're going to have to make cuts, right? Because they can't afford to pay every single minimum wage worker. So do you know who gets cut when companies make cuts?
Again, see the multiplier effect.
Do you know who gets cut when companies make cuts?
Again, you can look to the
Yeah,
multiplier
but
effect
what
to
you're failing
assure
to
you that
understand-
jobs will not be cut
what you're
because we're
failing-
going to see economic growth because
No.
these low-income Americans
we're
will be
not.
stimulating the economy.
How are low-income Americans who are barely living above the poverty line going to stimulate the economy?
Exactly. Right now, low-income Americans are spending the majority of their money on necessities. That doesn't have the same effect on the economy as it
Okay,
does
so
when
let's-
they go and spend
so
when
you
they go and spend their
increase-
money on other
Okay,
things.
so you
That's where we
increase-
see real economic stimulation when they spend their money on
you increase
luxuries.
the amount of wages you pay, you give money to some more people, but then you decrease the amount of jobs that are overall there.
Again, you try and
No,
bring
no,
up
no.
this idea of jobs decreasing,
your
but if we're
economic multiplier
increasing it,
just-
but if we see more economic stimulation, we're going to see more businesses producing more so that they can meet that demand, and you're going to see more people making those goods.
That's time. Ready? Judges? No, I think I'm going to be good.
standing here all day. Alright, time will start. Now, I want to start at the top of my case by addressing something very important. It's about the living wage. What is the living wage right now? Look to our second contention where we tell you that lots of people in major cities like New York City and different things cannot live there because they are not making enough. As the opponent said in Crossfire, people are barely surviving. Thus, our knowledge is that we need to have the minimum wage keep increasing so eventually we can meet the rates of inflation and different things in doing that. So the opponents are going to say there's a lot of short-term harms such as losing jobs and things, but we think an overall benefit of a multiplier effect with the economy and different things will eventually create more jobs and be more beneficial for the economy than the pro will ever tell you. Now, let's move on to, I also want to say I agree to all their observations that we should be helping people get through poverty. Now, let's look at their first contention where they say we're hurting poverty. This is not true for two reasons. First of all, we help overall poverty. As Andrew brought up in his Crossfire, there's something called the multiplier effect where if we allow people to make more, they spend more. And this goes to businesses and eventually grows the economy overall. They're going to tell you all these statistics about all these bad things. However, make them prove why the minimum wage is directly related to that. We're telling you that when people are able to do that, it overall stems economic growth, which is more important than what they're trying to tell you. Second of all, we show you that in case 96% of people make above the minimum wage, which means most businesses, a giant majority of businesses, are already able to pay all these people that amount of money, which means it's not that big of an issue. The small majority of people are not making that, but overall it's a benefit, and we think it's going to trickle down and help them the most. And now, second of all, they hurt poverty more because they hurt poverty more. And that's what I want to show you. Poverty is not the same thing as unemployment. Poverty is just how bad people live in conditions. Look to our first contention where we tell you they decrease the standard of living. We show you that when businesses are allowed to pay their employees whatever they want, it's realistically a race to the bottom. We show you that they will take advantage of their employees and pay them the least amount of possible because they want to have good profit. That is the incentivization for most businesses. I would almost argue all businesses, that they want to make the most profit. This means cutting wages, which is worse overall on a larger scale than losing jobs ever would. I don't want to concede, but I can think and see how we could be losing jobs short term, but I think, and we believe this as the econ team, that affecting people's wages is much worse for poverty on a large scale than a few people losing their jobs. Now, they also talk about outsourcing. However, as I asked in Crossfire, I asked him to give me just a couple realistic examples. He can't give me anything from inside the status quo, which means this isn't happening, so it doesn't matter. And second of all, it's not logical for small businesses or any businesses to do this because it's more expensive. And third, we show you that they say that small businesses are the main example. They said this in their case, and as he said, it applies to all businesses, but it's probably more small businesses. Most small businesses are actually pushing for a rise in the minimum wage. As I show you, I have a card that says that 2 in 3 small businesses actually want the minimum wage because they realize how good the profits are versus having to lay off employees, which most of them don't think they're going to have to. So for all those reasons, vote con. You want to do cross up here?
Yeah. So, everyone ready? Yeah? Cool. So time will start now. Let's start with your rebuttal to our case. You basically tell us the multiplier effect in response to our first contention, correct?
Correct.
Okay, so are you aware that according to Heritage Foundation that there's actually no link between disposable income and consumer spending? Are you aware of that?
I am not aware of that specifically.
Okay, cool. If you want to see the card, you can see afterwards. Okay, so now let's talk about outsourcing. You basically say we can't give you a logical example, right?
I said a realistic example.
A realistic example. So I mean, are you saying that there's no outsourcing?
I did not say that. I'm just saying.
So there is outsourcing, right?
No, I'm saying it's speculative. There's not just
Wait,
two. It's
so
not black and white. If I don't know it's happening, it doesn't mean it's either happening or not happening. It just means I don't know if it's happening or not.
Okay, so how come according to Harvey, when he said that when we increase the minimum wage, 70% of companies said that they would increase outsourcing?
I would assume that would mean it would be a real thing.
Cool, that's great. That's fine.
No. You're not understanding what I'm saying. I'm saying you're not linking it specifically to a minimum wage. You're just saying it happens.
Okay, so
There's a
I'll link it for you
Okay,
here.
thank you.
So basically, we realized that the minimum wage is essentially making it so that companies don't want to pay the minimum wage. And with the current status quo increasing the minimum wage, more and more companies are going to look toward outsourcing. Now, can I ask you a question?
Was that a question or was that?
No, you wanted me to link it for you, so I did. All right, now
Okay.
let's talk about your city stability. Are you advocating for a livable wage?
Not necessarily. I'm advocating that we try to push as far forward towards
So a significant increase in the minimum wage.
No, I did not say that. I think we should have a general trend trying to go towards a livable
Okay,
wage.
so let me tell you something. The livable wage in San Francisco is $30. Do you realize that?
I am not specifically aware of that.
So what is the current minimum wage right now in San Francisco? Around $11.
I believe it's in California. I believe it's actually more than that. I think it's almost 15.
$15. So are you suggesting that we should increase it to, like, we should increase it 100% and make it go from $15 to $30?
I am not saying either that's realistic or that it's going to happen, but I think it's a good idea.
Cool. Okay, so everyone ready? So quick off the clock roadmap. Their contentions, their rebuttal, then crossfire, and then we should be done. Cool? Alright, so time will start now. Let's start at the top of their case where they basically tell you the standard of living. So first of all, we have two responses here. One is that there's going to be protection regardless. Other companies will give you a higher wage, and if one company decides to drop lower, that means that the employees won't want to stay there. They're just going to go to another business. This impact isn't really here. And furthermore, they tell you in their rebuttal that 2/3 of small businesses want a minimum wage. Doesn't that mean that they're not going to drop lower? Turn that evidence on them. And furthermore, let's go on to their second contention, which is about city stability. First of all, they're basically advocating for a significant increase in the minimum wage. And look to the Heritage Foundation, who finds that when we increase the minimum wage to $15, it would lead to 9 million jobs lost. That's a significant impact on the economy, because what you can do here is you can extend the card we give you in our first contention, was that when we increase unemployment by 1%, we increase poverty by 0.7%. That's a huge impact. Slow that down, Judge. And then furthermore, the only way to actually increase, like, the reason why their city stability is not really there is because prices are too high, right? How do we reduce prices? We give more money to companies so that they can cut prices. So all pro has to do here is that prove that when we remove the minimum wage, we lead to more money to these businesses, and then that means we can turn their entire second contention. And now let's go into the third contention, which is about young adults. First of all, let's realize that there's something called internships. Internships are what people need to go to in order to actually get this get this experience and then go on to do better in society. And so they might argue, oh yeah, internships are only the specifically really educated, really rich. However, if we're trying to solve a problem with youth not being able to get a job, should we be focusing on actually doing the right thing, which is to solve the root of the problem? And what is the root of the problem? Not having enough internship opportunities in the first place. We shouldn't be thinking about abolishing minimum wage or keeping the minimum wage. We should rather be thinking about increasing internship opportunities. Don't let my opponents try to tell you this. It doesn't make sense. And furthermore, if you really want to talk about young adults and how they're not getting employment, let's talk about outsourcing. Right? We tell you that the Harvey study finds that when we increase the minimum wage, 70% more outsourcing. That's from these companies. That's extremely bad. That means economic things are going over to other countries, and we're helping our competitors while sacrificing our own. Furthermore, let's go on to their rebuttal. So they basically tell you, oh yeah, the multiplier effect. Yeah, I read you a statistic from Heritage Foundation, which finds that disposable income and consumer spending have no actual link, meaning that when we increase disposable income, there's no guarantee that there's going to be consumer spending, and that means our entire contention flows through, because that's their only real response there. Now let's go into their second contention, where they basically tell you, oh, we can't give you a logical example, yet we give you the Harvey study. They don't respond to that. Judge, you can get rid of their response there. And then their only other response is like 2/3 of small companies want a minimum wage. However, that basically just turns their entire first contention. Judge, please fill that down. And furthermore, let's just look at all the problems they give you. They basically tell you their only response to our first contention is just disposable income. So all we have to do here is that if disposable income isn't doing anything, then you must affirm. Thank you.
Ready for crossfire? All right. Time will start. Is everyone ready?
Yeah.
All right. Time will start now. So if I don't get an internship before I apply for a job at McDonald's, am I not qualified to flip burgers?
I can't tell you.
I mean, I'm just saying, should I have an internship before I apply for a minimum wage job?
I mean, if you want to be, like, if you want to seem better, yeah.
Well, I mean, clearly I can't flip burgers without an internship, right?
Good for you.
All right, so I'm guessing you're conceding that point. Now, let's address this Heritage Foundation thing. Have you read the Heritage Foundation's mission statement?
No.
Okay, well, they promote a far-right agenda. They've been lobbying for a far-right agenda for years, and they're well known to do that.
Okay.
So it makes sense that they would try and say that giving poor people more disposable income won't stimulate the economy, because they don't want a higher minimum wage, right?
Okay, sure. So let's assume that.
Oh, true.
Let's assume that it is biased, right?
Yeah.
Can you provide counter evidence saying something else, suggesting a different outcome?
What do you mean?
Can you give me a piece of evidence that says unemployment wouldn't go down?
But the thing is, right now cross-sexing you. So do you mind if I ask another question?
Oh, so you can't give a source. That's cool. Okay, yeah, sure.
All right. So when you say that two and three businesses want the minimum wage to increase, so they'll pay higher, is what you're saying?
I mean, if they want
Don't-
an increase, doesn't that mean that they want to pay them more?
But the problem with that is even if they want an increase in the status quo, it's because you have that baseline already set. So in order to counteract that, they're trying to get the most productive workers by increasing what they pay. But without the minimum wage baseline, don't you think that they'll lower their wages?
If they wanted to raise the minimum wage, if they want to pay more, they could pay more under our world and your world. There's no actual
but you
impact.
have to agree, right, that under the status quo, they only want to pay their employees more to get more productive employees
can't
because
they do that under ours?
you've already set the lowest
Wait.
bar so high
Why can't
that
they
they
do
need
that
to
under
go
ours?
above that to get more productive workers, right? So if we take away that bar, we're going to see them drop regardless, right?
That's not really logical.
I mean, how is it not logical? Can
I
you
mean,
explain?
like, it doesn't make sense. Like, if it's
I
gonna,
know,
it
can
can
you
happen
just
under either
explain?
world.
Can you explain
It would
why?
happen under either world.
Why?
Alright, pass it. Holy crap, I dropped the time. Got him. Can we run some prep?
Sure.
Time will start now. Alright, that was 25 seconds.
Judges ready? Opponents ready?
Yeah.
All right. We'll begin the clock now. So, Judge, I'd like to point out to you that my opponents agreed with our observations, meaning that we must weigh this round on whoever can provide for the lowest socioeconomic class. So with that in mind, we'll be moving on. So, first of all, we provide you several statistics in our case, such as Mirror and West in 2015, who found that a 10% increase in minimum wage was associated with a 0.5% decrease in net job growth. First of all, this has been left unrefuted, as my opponents have not said anything about this. The only evidence that they refute is Heritage Foundation saying that it's a biased source, but they don't provide us with any counter evidence, and even if it's a biased source, why does that mean we can't buy it? It's statistical evidence. It's a fact, okay? So they can't just say that we can't buy the evidence because it's a bias, and they don't provide us with any counter evidence, so you can't buy anything they're saying with that argument. Now, Judge, what we're seeing here is we increase the minimum wage. Companies are forced to make employment cuts. Their only response to this is to the multiplier effect. But here's why the multiplier effect is wrong. Because first of all, Heritage Foundation found that there's no direct correlation between the disposable income and employment. But second of all, here's why. You can put a little bit more money in the back pockets of the poor, but that does not mean they're going to go make investments in cars, in TVs, or surfboards, as a matter of fact. They're not going to be making these random investments that are going to be benefiting the economy. No, they're going to be increasing the amount of money on their appliances. They're going to be trying their best to benefit their life because they're not getting a substantial increase in the money. They're getting a small increase onto the con world. So what we're seeing is they're not benefiting the economy. They're not stimulating the economy. They're merely not even increasing the amount of jobs. And when we see that, they're decreasing the amount of jobs because we don't see companies being able to spend as much money on employment because the economy simply is not stimulated under a con world. So when we see a decreased amount of jobs, we provide a direct link between the decreased amount of jobs and the increased amount of poverty. So when there's an increase in poverty, my opponents are not providing for the lower socioeconomic class. Also, when we resort to illegal immigrants, which my opponents have yet to respond to, we see illegal immigrants not paying taxes. When they're not paying taxes, they're not benefiting our economy. So what they're actually hurting it. When they hurt the economy, we're seeing the low socioeconomic class getting hurt again. So for these reasons, we affirm the resolution. Thank you.
All right.
Start crowd now.
Yep.
That stopped. That was 1 minute and 7 seconds. Go for it.
All right. Is everyone ready? Time will start now. So let's talk about the economy. Right? They tell you that we're going to see all of this major job loss and we're going to see all these detrimental effects, and then they try and counter our response about the multiplier effect with some Heritage Foundation card, as well as another response about poor people not stimulating the economy. So first of all, I think we've thoroughly indicted that Heritage Foundation card. They've conceded that it's a far-right source. Completely discount that. They're working for a far-right agenda. I wouldn't listen to that at all. Now let's move on to the most recent response that they've given, which is that low-income Americans aren't stimulating the economy. What they fail to recognize is it's not only when you buy a car that you're stimulating the economy, it's when you buy anything you're stimulating the economy. They try and show you that only if you buy these major big ticket items you're stimulating the economy. That's not true. The problem is that when more money is going to wealthier people, which is what the Heritage Foundation is advocating for, they're the ones who are sitting on it and putting it in the bank and investing in things like that aren't giving as much of a direct contribution to the economy. What's happening is when you give low-income Americans more money in their back pocket, rather than just putting a roof over their head and putting a little dinner on the table, they're going to go out there and they're going to spend it on luxuries that actually provide direct stimulation for the economy, completely countering everything that they say about job loss and the amount of cash flow for businesses being cut. So don't buy anything that they tell you about the economy. Now let's move on to poverty. Right? So they tell you that people are going to be losing their jobs. But we want to let you know that we're going to be outweighing completely, because more people are going to be affected by lower wages in their world once we allow employers to start abusing their employees by engaging in a race to the bottom. We're going to see 2.6 million low-wage workers affected, as opposed to a few people losing their job in their world. Because let's be realistic, a $15 minimum wage isn't realistic. We're not advocating for that. We're advocating for pushing towards a livable wage, but not a $15 minimum wage. And using illegal immigrants for labor is completely non-unique, so don't buy it. Thank you.
I'll run back time. Starting everyone ready? Cool, so quick off the clock roadmap. Go over framework, observation, how you're going to weigh this round, and then voting issues, why we won. And that should be it. Cool? Alright, time will start now. First, let's look at our observation where we basically tell you that the lowest economic class should be prioritized. So people who are in poverty should way above all. So all pro has to do here is say that if we abolish the minimum wage, you're helping the people who are in the lowest socioeconomic class. If we do that, Judge, you must affirm. Now let's look at unemployment. It's been one of the biggest questions in today's debate. So first of all, let's talk about the Heritage Foundation, right? They say, oh, their only response here is that Heritage Foundation is a really right-wing, foundation, okay? But they don't actually ever give you a legitimate counter evidence to suggest otherwise. We present you Mere West 2015, right? They all find that when we increase the minimum wage, that means there's less jobs overall, and that impacts into Cato 2012, which finds that when the disemployment effects of the minimum wage disproportionately falls on the lowest socioeconomic class, which goes right back to our framework, which is why, Judge, you must affirm. And furthermore, look to the National Bureau of Economic Statistics, which they never even touched during their rebuttal, which finds that when we increase unemployment by 1%, we increase poverty by 0.7%. That goes right back to our framework. Judge, you must affirm there. And furthermore, let's talk about illegal immigrants. During their summary, they basically tell you, oh yeah, illegal immigrants are non-unique. Yet they neglect to look at the Congressional Economic Committee, which finds that when we increase the minimum wage, we're encouraging more illegal immigrants. That's extremely bad for the economy. And furthermore, that means more unemployment, because if unemployment is as important as they tell you, then that means we're basically making it worse. And furthermore, let's talk more and more about jobs, because jobs is basically our link into unemployment, and unemployment leads to more poverty. And so basically, you have to realize that they never tell you why the Heritage Foundation is actually wrong. They just say it's biased. Well, under your logic, if everything that was biased is not true, then why are we even using researchers? Because everybody has a certain bias, right? You can't say just because it's biased, it's not true. You have to actually tell me why maybe the methodology is wrong, or something that they did, or they didn't control some confounding variables, yet they did. We give you in every single study that they do this. They don't ever provide you counter evidence, and they don't ever actually tell you why it's actually wrong. Judge, you can't buy their response. And furthermore, let's talk about disposable income. The economist Palomar finds that when we give a small increase, it actually leads these citizens to paying debt and saving money. This doesn't lead to increased consumer spending. So if they want to tell you the Heritage Course is wrong, look to Palomar of Economics, which they never respond to either. Judge, please affirm.
You will be taking
The rest of our prep time.
which is 2 minutes and 3 seconds. Minute and 53. That's time. All right. Judges ready? Oh. What? Oh, thank you. Now judges are ready. Okay. So we're going to start with this. I want to say right at the top of the case, they have really nice numbers, but unfortunately a lot of this isn't making sense. Now, what I want all the judges to look to is you have to weigh the entire time frame of this debate. You have to realize that there are going to be some short-term harms if we do if we keep the minimum wage. However, the long-term benefits are always going to outweigh it. I believe this for a couple of reasons. Let's move on to that. Now, they say that the most important value is protecting the people. I agree to this, and I agree to this at the beginning for one reason, and one reason they haven't responded to is that they are affecting more poor people than we are. I want to first of all say they have extended no impacts into any of their final speeches and have not weighed anything against our case. They've only attacked our links and warrants. So you have to weigh our stuff against almost nothing unless you look back to their first speech. Now, let's look to our first contention where we tell you that businesses are going to take advantage of their employees. They've not expended any responses into their speeches, which means you have to realize you have to flow this through. This means that they're going to be, when you get rid of the standard of a minimum wage, you allow them to take advantage of their employees. This means there's going to be an overall decrease in wages, which is going to affect poverty much more than some little people losing their jobs. This is terrible. We also show you city stability. There's not a livable wage there, and we need to have it for a con ballot so we can push towards that. A pro ballot does not do this, and that's terrible because people are going to leave the cities. And also we tell you our young adults, which was virtually dropped by the opponents, where we tell you that they're very important because they're trying to get through their life right now, and they're the majority of the people under the minimum wage currently. All these impacts are solved by increasing the minimum wage because of the multiplier effect. We show you that when people have more money, they spend more, and this overall increases the economy. Their responses is the Heritage Foundation. As my partner has been continually saying, they are biased. Even if you do not buy this, you have to realize that this makes sense. And even if we don't have counter evidence to support it for you, it makes sense that when people spend money, the economy overall increases. This is very important because what you need to realize is they are affecting more poor people than we are. Thus, we win off their framework and their values, and that is the reason why you're going to be voting con today. Thank you.
We've come to the end. The suspense will be over in a moment, but this was I want to thank everyone up here. For a brisk final debate here, but thank you. It was really great. And these videos will be for all coaches and parents. These will be made available to you. And it's great because these provide education to others on how to debate. So thank you again. So in this final debate between Potomac and Capitol debate, we have a 3-0 decision. And I'd like to congratulate the national champions of the United States, and that is Capitol debate. May I have a standing ovation? May I have a standing ovation for the finalists of the National Debate Championship who did an amazing job? Can we hear from Potomac, Vinay, Mr. Baclia, and Kevin Zhang? National champions of debate. Are you guys ready? Let's recognize from Capitol Debate, Andrew Capani and Lee Caldwell. Yay!